Hello, everybody across Australia and anyone tuning in from overseas as well. Welcome to the August edition of Lowell Lodestar's Drilling Deeper webinar. This month, very excited to have an old colleague of mine and someone who played a big part in the discovery of one of the biggest gold discoveries in Australia in recent memory, Andy Beckwith, just recently from De Grey. Good morning, Andy, and welcome.
Morning, John.
Thank you very much for participating in the Drilling Deeper webinar. I'm looking forward to getting a couple of gems of wisdom as to how you and the team did it, whether they're little pearls of wisdom or they're big ones. I'm sure there'll be something in there for everybody. So before we kick off, just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to have three segments as per usual. Firstly, we'll kick off with a little discussion about what's happening in the market. And we're going to, because we've got Andy on this month, we're going to talk about M&A because De Grey obviously was part of one of the biggest M&A, if not the biggest gold M&A transaction this year in Australia in terms of gold. Then we'll turn it over to Andy to tell us about himself, about the background to the massive Hemi discovery. Then we'll hear a little bit about what he's been up to since leaving De Grey and what he's working on now. And then we'll have hopefully some time for a bit of Q&A. Other than that, look, I need to reiterate, this won't be financial advice, and please do your own research and seek professional advice in any investment decision. So firstly, without further ado, turning to the market prospects section of our webinar. And as mentioned today, I want to talk about the M&A that's been happening, particularly in the gold sector in Australia. What I want to talk about just briefly this morning is the M&A that's been happening in the metals and mining space, and in particular the gold space in Australia. And you can see a list of takeovers and deals that have been done in 2025, with Northern Star's takeover of De Grey being the biggest one by far, with a nominal value of 5 billion Aussie dollars. The most recent one that was announced just last week was the Capricorn takeover of Warriedar Resources, also in WA, in the WA goldfields. So what we're seeing is, with the very high gold price, we're seeing more interest in M&A in the sector, as well as perhaps some growing amount of mergers and acquisitions, which I attribute at least partly to the growing cash balances of many gold producers, given the high Aussie dollar gold price and what you might call the discipline in terms of not having grade creep, downwards creep, I should say, in terms of keeping the margin that gold production of gold producers, or expanding that margin and growing their cash balances. So Andy, I just wanted to maybe fire a couple of questions at you to get a bit of background about the takeover of De Grey. It was a little bit, at least from my perspective, I didn't see Northern Star as being the most obvious acquirer. Obviously, there was a lot of speculation, given it was one of the best discoveries and biggest discoveries we've seen in a long time. I think there was speculation that it might have gone to an overseas or North American gold company. I mean, presumably there were lots of interested parties, and were there many others that were close to the mark?
One of the big things with Hemi was we probably outstripped some of the potential takeovers very quickly. In terms of the discovery was very rapid. So the pool of companies probably that were going to target us towards the end became smaller, the bigger companies. And yes, I probably thought maybe an overseas company might see us as cheap with the exchange rate, etc. So Northern Star did come out of the blue a little. And I think they certainly came maybe a bit earlier than we thought the real threat would be. Personally, I thought it would be after we got into production, and maybe that's when they would target us, less risk, obviously. And maybe that's why Northern Star has come in early, to try and beat that larger company coming in and being a little bit more risk adverse.
And do you think there were key milestones that really catalyzed the takeover? Was it the getting along the permitting path, or was it the financing path, or was it, just the fact that, a little bit of FOMO, that they might miss out?
Yeah, look, I don't think there was any one critical thing. We were probably getting close to finding out where the approval process was. The approval process, once that's through and finalised, obviously probably makes it a bit more attractive for everybody. So, yeah, I think they've made their move knowing the Australian approval process stronger than maybe some overseas companies, and thought that they could handle that. So, yeah, we're pretty advanced on that already. Now, our intention was to build it, not to be taken over. So we weren't out there spruiking it, if you want to call it that.
Right.
They came to us. We said we'd listen, provided the value's there for shareholders.
Okay. All right. So you weren't running a process. You didn't have investment bank out there brooking it around the world. Presumably you drove a very hard bargain. I assume that the initial price that they discussed was lower than the final price.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Obviously the pricing's the hardest part. I suppose myself might have been one of the last ones to cave in.
Good.
Being involved with the project, being a geologist, it's the geo's dream to find it and build it and get into production. So for me, it was more the downside rather than the upside. I suppose the way the deal was structured, it was at a nominal price, and we were still, it takes 6 months to finalise these things, and anything can happen. So the downside was probably the biggest risk for me. Fortunately, the gold price probably helped us along with the American politics going on at the same time. In the end, it was announced as a $5 billion deal. It probably finished on a $6 billion deal, thankfully, on the gold price helping us along.
Yeah. I'm probably underrepresented on this chart, but I think you're right. $6 billion probably where it ended up.
Yep.
And so I guess what we're interested in, or everybody's interested in, is what's next, and just picking the Lowell Resources Fund top 10 portfolio. We certainly think that there's potential M&A in some of the companies that are in the fund's top 10. In particular, New World Resources is pretty much a done deal. That has benefited from being in the US. That's not gold, obviously. That's copper in the US, which has been extremely topical with the Trump tariffs. So that was a takeover battle between a European base metal miner and a North American private equity fund. Other things, we think that Astral Resources, south of Kalgoorlie, with 1.7 million ounces, and possibly, or probably within 12 months of taking an FID decision, that could be something that looks attractive to neighbours such as Goldfields or Westgold. Overseas, Free Gold Ventures, put it there. It's even bigger than Hemi. That's Free Gold come out with their Golden Summit resource of 29 million ounces at a bit over a gram near the Fort Knox gold mine of Kinross. So we think that at some point, while it's definitely not as advanced as Hemi, may be in line for some M&A. And then Saturn Metals, low-grade project, but the economics look really very attractive at these Aussie dollar gold prices, and in a region around Leonora where there's a number of mid-tier players who looking to expand their resources and reserves. And finally, Sunstone Metals, basically saying that they're in a process. They're overseas, they're in Ecuador for their massive gold, copper exploration targets. They've been publicly announced that they're talking to numerous parties about some form of a deal, whether it's project level or corporate level. So look, that's just an example of perhaps a fairly small universe of companies in our portfolio as a representation of the large amount of potential M&A that may be brewing in the sector. Andy, I don't know if you've got any other, apart from Carnival, you've got any other companies that you think might be in the pipeline for M&A? We're probably going to see some more by the end of the year.
Definitely, there'll be more. I think probably what I'm seeing is a lot of smaller companies. With the gold price being up, some of these small deposits that are a little bit like the Carnival situation that we'll talk about. These things are quite economic at these high gold prices. So getting together with a partner or somebody with a mill is going to be an important thing, or at least a joint venture scenario. So on the smaller end, I think there'll be more as well. The bigger companies, I think it will be continual. They have to replace reserves and resources as they're mining. So yeah, they're not necessarily exploring themselves. They might be doing their near deposit exploration, but maybe not new exploration. So any company that has a new deposit within trucking distance or that has economics to build its own plant, they've got to be a target in the current gold price.
Yeah. And do you think with the De Grey takeover, was it driven by, it was driven by the potential production profile, presumably? It wasn't so much just adding reserves or adding resources. It was really, production ounces.
No, you'll see in my PowerPoint and discussion later on that, yeah, the resources reserves potentially is roughly 20% of Northern Star with the Hemi asset. So, yeah, they certainly came to us saying this will be the fourth production pillar. And that's the most important thing for, I think, our shareholders, was that they would take it to production. They've got the benefit of other production. Shareholders have got, you could argue, lower risk profile under Northern Star.
Andy, I might ask you to share your screen to take us through both the Hemi story, the De Grey story, and your own personal career, which we're really looking forward to hearing about.
So yeah, look, thank you for inviting me to be involved in this. It's a bit daunting talking about yourself a little, but Hemi was a fantastic discovery. That's a photo of some of the drill out during it. And look, Hemi's a very rare large-scale gold discovery. Like you said, it's very few and far between in recent history in Australia. But I think the thing that probably makes it even stand out more was it was delineated rapidly. And that's a function of its scale and the style of mineralization. But it's also, I've got to give credit to everybody in the team. Our consultants, our contractors, they all put in hard. And importantly, during the COVID times, so it was even more difficult. So it's just an exceptional effort put in by everybody. And it's probably, I think for me, probably where it hit home the value of a discovery and the value it can create for shareholders. On holidays down south, actually, and Phil rang me and said, have you seen the results? And I'm going, what results? And he goes, explain them to me. And I said, well, that's pretty staggering. And he used some other words, which Phil is not known to say. Later in that day was some more results had come in, and there was some more expletives on the text message, and it all started from there, basically. So that's all I really got on De Grey, other than, unless you got some more questions, John. But yeah, I got a few lessons I think are important. Where Carnival sits right now is Kukani. We had a brand new discovery under cover again. To me, the big takeaways for all of this is, and I haven't put it up there in words, but